Good morning and welcome to Morning Moments. This is part 7 in our communication skills session. We are continuing to talk about how communication skills can affect our issues of anger, or I should say miscommunication. That's really how it should be described most of the time. Please go back and listen to our other sessions that we've had. This is session number 7, and we're now continuing to be on the message is sent from the sender to the receiver. The receiver receives the message from our hearing, and now the next step they do is they decode the message in words they can understand. There's a decoding that goes on. So if the sender says, I'm talking to you today about this big long animal, tall animal, long neck, got these two goofy things on his head, looks like an alien. It's from Africa, big spots, long neck. What is it? And most of you will go, I think he's talking about a giraffe. All right. Animal from the desert, could be one hump or two. I had the honor and privilege to ride one of these at a zoo one time. Check that off on my bucket list. And animal spits. Oh, that's a camel. You know what I described? I put a picture together. What I did is do a visual picture, guided imagery in your head of what I want to communicate, and you put the picture together. You decoded my message and said, well, that sounds to me like they're talking about a camel. That sounds to me like they're talking about a giraffe. That's the decoding that takes place, and it happens all the time. I talked about the mix-up sometimes with words when sometimes there's barriers in language. Maybe a southern versus northern statement, or maybe somebody has a language barrier. Just the other day I was teaching some nurses in Puerto Rico at a hospital in Puerto Rico, and many of the folks in the class who was teaching virtually had a hard time with English, so I had one of the nurses there translating what I said, and I would say a few things clinically what I was talking about, and then I'd just wait, and then I'd heard them talk in my ear. I hear this and not quite understanding what they said, and sometimes I'm thinking, boy, it's taking a lot longer to translate this little piece than others, and maybe they're having questions and the translator's helping out as a nurse, also explaining it to them. And then I go, did everyone understand that? Yes, well, we had a question about, and then I'd answer the question, and then she'd go back and translate. And I think how often, sometimes we need translators. Sometimes in tough communication between couples or family members or somebody that you're angry with, sometimes we need somebody in the middle to translate. Say, okay, calm down. Here's what we're trying to say, and I want you to maybe put it in different words. A moron is not a good thing to say to right now. You should call him moron. Maybe we should be a little gentler now. And now let's talk to them, in a civil way, so they can understand. Sometimes that referee in between really helps, especially when there's a breakdown in communication, and people have a hard time encoding messages and decoding what they really meant, and the receiver, they said this and I thought they said that. That's the decoding of that message that the receiver receives. And it could be they decoded it because they have said things in the past that was hurting, and they just thought, well, they're just trying, there's a double message involved with this, and they're just and it could be. So there are often times that the decoding of that message needs help. And we really, if you don't understand what they said, or you think that they're saying something that you didn't think they really meant, we need to go back and ask them, is that what you meant? And we'll talk about feedback next week. But when they give feedback that gives the opportunity for that sender of the message to say, well, let me think about this. Let me put it in words that you can understand. You know, when I always have to think about where folks are at, the coding and the decoding, because sometimes it's not an issue of understanding what you're saying, the words that you're saying, the words coming out of your mouth. Maybe they just don't understand the principles. So sometimes I'll talk about things technical or things psychologically or medically to folks, and they go, I don't understand what COPD is, or pneumonia, or arrhythmia, or AFib. I don't understand what you're saying. Well, then I have to step back and go, well, I can't speak here if you don't have the basics here. And there's sometimes it's just people speaking over you all the time because we're trying to decode messages that have no knowledge for. Sometimes there's common coding that's needed. All right. Have you ever taken a 200 level or 300 level class before you took the 100 level class? I got to go back to the basics before I could give them the information that's higher, learning higher. So it's that way in our communication too. And sometimes people do it on purpose just to try to make everybody look smarter than you, rather than are we truly wanting to communicate those things. Sometimes we have to bring it to people's level. Remember what I talked about encoding and said, if I talk to you like a little toddler, you're going to get upset. But, you know, maybe somebody needs to say, well, let me put it in words people can understand, because right now they don't understand this. That's the encoding and the decoding. That's so important, especially when there's a lot of anger because of what we communicated. That's not what I meant when I said this is what I was actually saying. That comes with time, and it also takes with a process of communicating, and not just one form of communication, throw it out there, and that's it. It takes work to communicate correctly and properly, and understanding with both parties, the sender and the receiver. So today's message was about decoding and I hope that was helpful for you as we continue with our teaching of communication skills. Next week, we're going to talk about feedback. All right. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next week.